Let's talk about the grid. Aging infrastructure. This is actually something I don't know where you're at politically on this. I lean right, I'll be honest. But actually something that I thought was really important was even though I thought it was dubbed stupidly, but that's politics for you, is the Inflation Reduction Act, right? I hate the idea or the name of it on all fronts. However, I did not disagree that there was an enormous level of necessary federal infrastructure investment that needed to happen. Some of the initiatives inside of that, though, were around EV chargers. And when I look at that, I think we were promised, and we're constantly promised these things, that we'll have this massive EV infrastructure. But obviously that fell short. And I know that contract was promised to the IBEW network. So IEC plays a huge part in actually potentially achieving these goals that we want. So you guys will go in and kind of legislate to make sure that these contracts have the opportunity to really flourish potentially, or at least the promises to the public.
Yeah, so IEC, both at the national level and at the local level, as being a trade association, we're sort of like the Chamber of Commerce for the electrical trade, if you will. So we do a lot of member services. We do a lot of things that help our businesses grow, that help connect them to our industry partners, that provide the education and training for their workforce, helping them with workforce development. But a big piece of what we also do is policy and advocacy. How are we representing these individual businesses, some of them small, some of them large, but how are we really making sure that we have a voice before elected officials at the state level, at the federal level, and even sometimes at a local level. And what you're referring to with the EV infrastructure was a piece of state legislation that was passed, I can't remember the year now, but 2019 maybe, that would have taken ratepayer money, so not tax money, but what we pay for electrical bills, would have taken ratepayer money to put into a fund to build out commercial infrastructure in the state of Colorado. And we weren't, for some of the things that you just mentioned, we don't really think that should be, our members didn't really think that it should be ratepayer money to be used for marketplace infrastructure development.
Right. So basically we're taking a little bit off the top here to put it into a fund to say we're going to now fund commercial infrastructure for this particular program.
Correct. We're let's let that naturally evolve. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fund that does it.
And that's going into the rebates that these...
the we is, our IEC government team, government relations, our members, we don't really support the idea. However, the build out of infrastructure in the EV space is good for the industry because it's going to have to be serviced and maintained. Right. It's, somebody's got to install it. It's going to have to be serviced and maintained. So we're like, well, okay, it's going to happen. This just advances it in at the time that the legislation passed. What ended up happening in reality is that the utility, instead of making it like their normal public rebates that you can be an electrical contractor and as long as you're qualified, you can have access to the rebate funds or you can do the work and get the rebate. That's how most of those rebate programs work. In this particular case, they were using something called a line extension agreement that allowed one contractor to do all the install. So it took away the competitiveness of everybody having an opportunity to participate in the commercial installation. And in fact, we started hearing about it from electrical contractor members of ours that had been doing that work previously. And they're like, we no longer can access the work because the local utility is doing all the work. But in fact, whether you're union or non-union or you're a public utility, we've all got the same workforce shortages. We've all got retirements. We've all got people that have moved up into other roles. So we're all trying to recruit and educate and retain and get people licensed. So there is a big enough workforce for all of this work that's coming in the grid development and infrastructure that's going to happen. So anyway, so all of this work was getting done by this one contractor through this line extension agreement. The power utilities are regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. So we went to the PUC in Colorado and said, we don't think this is fair. We don't think this is accurate. And aside from that, our contractors not being able to access the work, And there's some of them are losing $150,000 to $200,000 every time they don't get a project that they previously would have gotten.
Yeah, because they had it
independent
in their,
of the commercial entity saying, "Hey, I want to do some EV infrastructure in my,
put that into my portfolio mix.
Exactly. In my retail environment or my multifamily housing or whatever it was." So, we started hearing about it. So we went to the PUC. We said, "This is not fair." And besides that, this one aspect of doing the installation is not going to meet Colorado's energy goals for 2030 and 2040,
right, which are huge,
also legislated.
enormous, yeah.
Yes, which are, this was legislation, but those goals, those energy sector goals are also regulated, are also legislation that has been passed. So we're out here trying to meet these goals of building it out and meeting them, everybody working together to do it. And then we found this barrier. So we went before the Public Utilities Commission. They agreed with our argument and changed the way that rebate structure is working. And we believed then, and we still believe now, and this is the way it's being implemented, is that you do need to be qualified. You do need to meet certain parameters. You do need to be educating and training and ensuring
we all
that
agree. Everybody agrees.
All those things that we agree
agree.
on, it needs to be safe,
right?
So all of those things, as long as you are capable and qualified and doing the right thing and running your business, it should be access to all. And that's really how we approach everything that we do from a policy and advocacy perspective. Is we're okay with safety requirements. We're okay with with education and training. We're okay with certain parameters around the expectations. But we always believe that it should be accessible to everyone who's qualified and capable.
So is there a loose opinion out there then that the IEC members are kind of just cowboys, doing their thing? That's not what I'm kind of driving out of this?
Yeah. I don't know, and I hope not, because we don't want cowboys to be part of our members, right? They can be real cowboys. I'm okay with that part, right? But no, we expect them to educate and train. We expect them to be employers of choice. We expect them to have a culture of safety in the workplace. We want that, and in fact, having them part of our membership helps us to ensure that we know we're giving them the tools they need in order to grow their businesses and prosper. Because if they don't, they're not going to be in business long. We want them getting their continuing education and staying licensed. Like occasionally do I hear a story that makes me go, I wish I didn't know that story. But that just makes me double down on making sure we're educating people on those expectations. So, because that's who we want as our members. And we want those individuals, and they come to us, oftentimes. So you go through the apprenticeship program, you get your license, you get to be a master. Being an electrician is what you're passionate about. Being able to do the work and say, that's my project. Like you can't, you hear all the time from kids and grandkids, they're like, oh, every time we get in the car, that's my project. I built Coors Field. I built that hospital. I built that bridge.
Yes. Which
whatever.
I actually appreciate that.
I love it.
Because I'm like, good. A little bit of pride in your work. That's awesome.